The cook. The cowboy never hired. The day Clara Monroe discovered she'd been hired by a 6-year-old child instead of the rancher who owned the property. She stood in a snowstorm with her carpet bag, staring at a little girl's triumphant smile and a widowed cowboy's horrified expression, realizing her entire future had been orchestrated by someone who couldn't even reach the stove without a stool, and that somehow, impossibly, this might be exactly where she was supposed to be. If you're curious how a child's scheme became the greatest love story in Wyoming territory, stay until the end. And please, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The advertisement had been simple enough to seem honest. Cook wanted. Isolated ranch, room and board, steady work. Apply in person, Hawkins Ranch, 12 miles north of Prescott. Clara Monroe had folded that newspaper clipping into her apron pocket 6 weeks ago, when the boarding house where she'd worked for 3 years closed its doors for good. Prescott, Wyoming territory, wasn't much. A collection of weathered buildings clinging to existence in the shadow of the mountains. But it was dying slower than most frontier towns, and that made it a place where a woman alone might survive if she was careful and capable. Clara was both. She'd walked the 12 miles because she couldn't afford the stage, and because walking gave her time to prepare the speech she'd need. Experience, references, willingness to work. She'd cooked for miners, ranch hands, traveling salesmen, and once, briefly, for a territorial judge who'd complimented her biscuits before moving on. She knew how to make much from little, how to stretch supplies through a hard winter, how to keep a kitchen running when everything else was falling apart. What she didn't know, as she crested the final ridge and saw the Hawkins Ranch spread below her in the valley, was that the man who supposedly needed a cook had no idea she was coming. The ranch was larger than she'd expected. A 2-story house with a wide porch, a barn that looked recently repaired, corrals that stretched toward the tree line, and smoke rising steady from the chimney. Cattle dotted the winter-brown pastures, and she could see a figure working near the barn. Tall, moving with the economic grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime doing hard work efficiently. Clara adjusted her carpet bag, smoothed her traveling dress, and started down the slope. She was halfway to the house when the front door opened and a child appeared. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7, with dark braids and a dress that was clean but patched at the elbows. She stood on the porch with her hands on her hips, watching Clara approach with an intensity that seemed too old for her small face. Clara raised her hand in greeting. "Hello there." The child didn't wave back. She waited, utterly still, until Clara reached the bottom porch step. "You came," the girl said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Clara smiled, though something about the child's certainty made her uneasy. "I did. I'm here about the cook position. Is your father home?" "He's in the barn." The girl tilted her head, studying Clara with dark eyes that missed nothing. "You're prettier than I thought you'd be." "That's kind of you to say." Clara set her bag down, suddenly aware that this conversation wasn't following the script she'd prepared. "Should I wait here, or what's your name?" "Clara Monroe." "Miss or Mrs.?" "Miss." The girl nodded as if confirming something on an invisible checklist. "I'm Lily Hale. This is my house. Well, it's Papa's house, but I live here too, so it's also mine. Do you like children?" Clara crouched down, bringing herself to eye level. "I do. I have 3 younger brothers back home. Had, I suppose. They're all grown now." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Not just cook. Can you cook well?" There was something fierce in the question, something that made Clara answer with absolute honesty. "Yes. I can cook well." "Can you read?" "Yes." "Out loud?" "Of course." "Do you sing?" Clara blinked. Yes, a little." "Good." Lily crossed her arms. "Do you scare easy?" "No." "Do you cry a lot?" "Not particularly." "Are you mean?" "I try not to be." "But have you ever been mean? When you had to be?" Clara thought of the traveling whiskey salesman who'd cornered her behind the boarding house kitchen and the cast iron skillet she'd introduced to his skull. "When necessary." Lily's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Then you'll do. Before Clara could ask what exactly she'd do for, the girl turned and cupped her hands around her mouth. Papa, the new cook is here! The figure by the barn stopped moving. Even from a distance, Clara could see the sudden rigidity in his posture, the way he went completely still before slowly, deliberately, setting down whatever he'd been holding. He started toward the house. Lily sat down on the porch step, patting the space beside her. You should sit. Papa doesn't like surprises. Claire remained standing. I don't understand. Didn't he place the advertisement? No. Lily swung her feet, utterly unconcerned. I did. The world tilted slightly. Clara gripped the porch railing. You... what? I wrote the advertisement. Well, I told Mr. Henderson at the newspaper what to write, and I paid him with egg money, $2. He said it wasn't proper, but I told him Papa needed help and was too stubborn to ask for it, which is true. Lily looked up at her matter of fact. We need a cook. Papa can't cook anything except beans and burnt bacon, and I'm tired of being hungry all the time. Clara's mind raced. Your father doesn't know I'm coming. Not exactly. Not exactly? He knows we need help. He just doesn't know I hired someone. Lily stood up, brushing off her dress. But it'll be fine. You're here now and you're qualified, and Papa's reasonable when he's not being stubborn. The man approaching the house was perhaps 35, lean and weather-worn, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to be surprised by anything good. He wore work clothes, canvas trousers, a worn shirt, a leather vest, and moved with a kind of contained wariness that made Clara think of animals that had learned not to expect kindness. He stopped at the base of the porch steps, looking from Lily to Clara and back again. Lily. His voice was quiet, controlled. What did you do? I hired a cook. Lily lifted her chin. Her name is Miss Clara Monroe. She has experience, references, and she's not afraid of hard work. She walked 12 miles to get here, so you should at least invite her inside for coffee before you decide anything. Clara watched something complicated move across the man's face. Frustration, resignation, embarrassment, and underneath it all, a bone-deep exhaustion that made her chest ache. He looked at Clara. I'm Ethan Hale. This is my daughter, and apparently my business manager. I gathered. Clara kept her voice steady. I apologize for the confusion. I responded to an advertisement in good faith. If you'd prefer I leave... No. Lily stood up, positioning herself between them. She stays. We need her, Papa. You know we do. That's not how this works, Lily. Then how does it work? Because you won't hire anyone, and I'm tired of eating beans, and the house is a mess, and you work every single day until you're so tired you can barely stand and something has to change. Lily's voice cracked just slightly. Something has to get better. Silence settled over the porch. Clara watched Ethan's jaw tighten, watched him look at his daughter with something that might have been pain or pride or both. Finally, he turned to Clara. Can you actually cook? Yes. Do you have references? Clara opened her bag, pulled out the 3 letters she'd collected over the years. Ethan took them, scanned them quickly, and handed them back. Room and board, he said. $20 a month. Cooking, basic housekeeping. I expect meals at 6, noon, and 6. Nothing fancy, just edible. He paused. The last cook quit after 2 weeks because the isolation got to her. Nearest neighbor is 4 miles south. Town is 12 miles. Winter can cut us off for weeks at a time. Clara thought of the boarding house, closed and empty. Of the $3 left in her pocket. Of the long walk back to a town that had nothing left for her. That's acceptable. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, to find a reason to refuse, but Lily was watching him with such fierce hope that he seemed to deflate slightly. Fine. He gestured toward the door. Lily, show Miss Monroe to the spare room. I'll finish in the barn. He walked away without another word, shoulders tight, and Clara understood that she'd just witnessed a man who'd been outmaneuvered by his own daughter and didn't quite know how to process it. Lily grabbed Clara's hand with surprising strength. Come on, your room is upstairs. It's small, but it has a window and a good quilt, and it's warm because it's above the kitchen. Inside, the house was clean but stark. Functional furniture, bare walls, everything in its place, but nothing that suggested comfort or joy. The kitchen was spacious, well-equipped, and obviously underused. Clara could see a layer of dust on the good pans hanging from their hooks. Lily led her upstairs to a small room that held a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. The quilt was indeed good, a wedding ring pattern in blues and creams, the stitching fine and even. "Mama made that," Lily said quietly, watching Clara's fingers trace the pattern. "Before she got sick." Clara withdrew her hand. "I'm sorry. It was 2 years ago." Lily sat on the edge of the bed, small and suddenly very young. "I don't remember her voice anymore. I remember other things, how she smelled like lavender soap, how she sang while she worked, how she made the house feel warm even in winter, but not her voice." She looked up at Clara. "That's why I needed someone who could sing." Understanding settled over Clara like snow. "You didn't just hire a cook." "No." Lily's chin trembled, but she didn't cry. "I hired someone to make it feel like home again. Papa works so hard and he's so sad, and I don't know how to fix it, but I thought, maybe if someone came who could cook real food and sing and make the house warm again, maybe he'd remember how to be happy." Clara sat down beside her, this small girl who'd taken her egg money and placed an advertisement and orchestrated a stranger's arrival because she was trying to save her father from drowning in his own grief. "That's a lot of responsibility for someone to carry," Clara said gently. "I know." Lily looked at her hands. "But nobody else was going to do it. Papa's too stubborn, and the neighbors try, but they have their own problems, and the women from town—" She wrinkled her nose. "They want to marry him, you can tell. They bring pies and wear their good dresses and smile too much. But they don't actually care about us. They just want the ranch." Clara thought of the man she'd just met, guarded, grieving, clearly barely holding himself together. "And you think I'm different?" "I know you are." Lily turned to face her, suddenly fierce again. "You walked 12 miles. You didn't come in a buggy wearing a fancy dress. You have patches on your sleeves just like me. You looked Papa in the eye and didn't simper or flutter or pretend to be helpless." She paused. "And when I asked if you'd ever been mean when you had to be, you said yes. That means you can protect yourself. Mama couldn't. She was too gentle, and when she got sick, she just gave up. Lily, I need someone strong." The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone who'll stay. Can you be that person?" Clara looked at this child who'd lost her mother, who was watching her father fade, who'd taken matters into her own hands with the desperate courage of someone who had nothing left to lose. She thought of the empty boarding house, the $3 in her pocket, the long series of temporary positions and temporary rooms that had made up her adult life. She thought of the wedding ring quilt beneath her fingers, made by a woman who'd tried to leave warmth behind. "I can try," Clara said. Lily smiled, a real smile this time, bright and relieved. "Good. Now come on, I'll show you the kitchen, and you can make dinner. And when Papa comes in from the barn and smells real food cooking, he'll remember that letting me hire you was a good idea." Well, the kitchen, Clara discovered, had everything she needed and nothing she didn't. Good cast iron, sharp knives, a well-maintained stove. The pantry was adequately stocked. Flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, a few canned goods. A root cellar held potatoes, carrots, and onions. Not much, but enough. Lily sat at the kitchen table watching Clara work with the same intense attention she'd shown on the porch. "What are you making?" "Chicken and dumplings. I saw hens in the yard. Do they lay regularly?" "Yes, Papa built them a good coop. We sell eggs in town sometimes, but mostly we just eat them." Lily paused. "That's where my egg money came from. Papa lets me keep the money from 6 hens. He said it's important for me to learn about earning and saving." Clara smiled, measuring flour. "Sounds like he's teaching you well." "He tries. He's just tired all the time." Lily traced patterns on the table. "After Mama died, people kept bringing food for a while. Casseroles and pies and things. But then they stopped, and Papa didn't know how to cook, and I was too little to reach the stove safely. So we ate a lot of beans, and burnt bacon, and sometimes just bread with butter." Clara's hands stilled. "That must have been hard." "It was worse watching Papa get thinner. He always made sure I ate, but he'd skip meals or just have coffee. He thought I didn't notice, but I did. Lily looked up, her dark eyes serious. That's when I started planning. I saved my egg money for 8 months before I had enough for the advertisement. I told Mr. Henderson exactly what to write. Cook wanted isolated ranch, room and board, steady work. I didn't mention Papa because I knew he'd refuse anyone who answered. You're quite the strategist. I'm desperate. The blunt honesty in the child's voice was startling. And I'm scared. Not of being hungry. I know Papa won't let me starve, but I'm scared of watching him disappear a little more every day. I'm scared of this house staying empty and sad forever. I'm scared. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm scared of forgetting what it feels like to have a family. Clara set down her measuring cup and moved to the table, crouching beside Lily's chair. You're very brave. I'm very alone. Lily blinked rapidly. Papa loves me. I know he does, but he's so far away all the time, even when he's right here, and I don't know how to bring him back. Maybe, Clara said carefully, that's not something you should have to do by yourself. That's why you're here. The simple faith in those words made Clara's throat tight. She stood, returning to her dumplings, and tried to keep her voice steady. I'm here to cook, Lily. That's all I can promise. For now, Lily said. But you'll see. Papa's not as hard as he seems. He's just hurt. And hurt things need gentle handling. Clara thought of Ethan Hale's eyes, wary, exhausted, carrying the weight of a grief he clearly hadn't processed. She thought of the bare walls, the dusty pans, the house that had all the pieces of a home but none of the warmth. She thought of her own years of drifting, of temporary positions and temporary rooms, of telling herself that not belonging anywhere meant she could leave anywhere without regret. We'll see, she said, and focused on making the dumplings light and tender, the way her mother had taught her 20 years ago in a different kitchen, in a different life. Ethan came in at 6 exactly, hung his hat on the peg by the door, and stopped dead when he smelled what was cooking. Clara watched from the kitchen, saw his shoulders tense, saw something vulnerable flash across his face before he locked it down. Lily appeared from the parlor, where she'd been pretending to read. Dinner's ready, Papa. Miss Monroe made chicken and dumplings. He looked at the table, set with proper plates and napkins, a pot of coffee already steaming, biscuits wrapped in a clean towel. He looked at Clara, standing by the stove with a ladle in her hand, and for just a moment she saw past his defenses to the raw loneliness underneath. Smells good, he said quietly. Thank you. Clara served the dumplings, steam rising, chicken tender and falling off the bone. I hope it's to your taste. They sat. Ethan bowed his head briefly, not quite a prayer, more a moment of acknowledgement, and then picked up his fork. The first bite seemed to undo something in him. He closed his eyes, just for a second, and Clara saw his throat work as he swallowed. It's good, he said. Really good. It's amazing, Lily corrected, already on her second dumpling. It's the best thing I've eaten in forever. Ethan shot her a look. My cooking's not that bad. Papa, it is. Despite himself, his mouth quirked, not quite a smile, but close. He took another bite, and another, and Clara watched him eat like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be properly fed. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just 3 people too uncertain of each other to risk conversation, focused on the simple ritual of a shared meal. When Lily's eyes started to droop, Ethan sent her to get ready for bed. Clara stood to clear the dishes. I'll handle cleanup. I can help. Ethan carried his plate to the sink, and they worked side by side in careful quiet, washing and drying and putting away. Finally, Ethan spoke. I should apologize. For Lily. For the situation. No need. Clara dried the last plate. She was trying to help. She ambushed you, and me. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't place that advertisement. I didn't hire you. I barely have enough work to justify the expense. Then why haven't you sent me away? The question hung between them. Ethan stared at the dish towel in his hands. Because she's right, he said finally. We do need help. I've been managing, barely, and Lily, he swallowed hard. She deserves better than burnt bacon and a father who's too tired to read her bedtime stories. So I can stay? For now, trial basis. If it doesn't work out, I understand. He nodded, still not looking at her. Room and board, $20 a month, meals and basic housekeeping. I'm gone most days, work doesn't stop on a ranch. Lily's your responsibility during the day, but she's a good kid. Smart, self-sufficient, probably too much so. She is remarkable, Clara said carefully, but she's also carrying a lot. I know. The words sounded scraped raw. I'm working on it. He left the kitchen before she could respond, and Clara heard him climb the stairs to read Lily her story. She finished putting away the dishes, banked the fire in the stove, and stood in the quiet kitchen of this house that wasn't hers, hired by a child to fix problems she didn't fully understand. But upstairs she could hear Ethan's low voice reading, and Lily's occasional question, and the soft rhythm of a father and daughter clinging to their evening ritual, even though everything else had fallen apart. Clara touched the edge of the table, solid, well-made, scarred from use. For now, she whispered to the empty room. I can do this for now. And she tried not to think about how for now was all she'd ever allowed herself, or how Lily's desperate hope might demand something more permanent than Clara knew how to give. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house held its breath, waiting to see if a stranger could become something more, waiting to see if healing could start with something as simple as dumplings and a warm kitchen and someone willing to stay long enough to try. The first week passed in a careful dance of avoidance and necessity. Clara rose before dawn, stoked the stove, and had coffee ready when Ethan came down. He'd nod his thanks, drink it standing by the window, and disappear into the gray morning without conversation. Lily would appear an hour later, already dressed, her braids somewhat crooked because she insisted on doing them herself. Papa used to help, she'd explained on the third morning, sitting patiently while Clara rebraided her hair. But his hands are too rough now. He pulls too tight and doesn't know it. Clara had said nothing, just smoothed the dark hair and tied it with ribbon, and pretended not to notice how Lily leaned into the gentle touch like someone starving for it. The house revealed itself slowly. Clara cleaned as she cooked, discovering layers of neglect beneath the surface order. Dust thick on the mantel where photographs should have been, but weren't. A parlor that looked unused, furniture pushed against walls as if to take up less space. Lily's room was neat but sparse. A few books, a rag doll with one arm coming loose, drawings tucked under the mattress that Clara pretended not to see. Ethan's room she didn't enter. That felt like crossing a line neither of them had agreed to yet. By the second week, a rhythm had established itself. Clara cooked 3 real meals a day, not fancy, but substantial. Biscuits and gravy for breakfast, sandwiches and soup for lunch, pot roast, stew, chicken fried steak for dinner. She baked bread twice a week, and the smell filled the house in a way that made Lily close her eyes and smile. Mama used to bake on Wednesdays, Lily said once, kneading a small piece of dough Clara had given her. The whole house smelled like this. Papa would come in early just to steal a piece while it was still hot. Clara glanced out the window to where Ethan was mending fence in the far pasture. He hadn't come in early once since she'd arrived. Maybe he will again, Clara said, though she didn't believe it. Lily shaped her dough into a lumpy roll. He's afraid. Of what? Of it feeling good, of remembering. Lily pressed her thumb into the center of the dough, creating a small well. Sometimes I think he believes if he lets himself be happy, he's betraying Mama, like grief is the only way he knows how to love her anymore. The observation was too knowing for a 6-year-old, too raw. Clara set down her rolling pin. That's very wise, she said carefully, and very sad. It's true, though. Lily looked up, flower on her nose. You've noticed it, too. The way he won't look at you during dinner, the way he leaves the room when you're singing, the way he says thank you for meals like he's apologizing for something. Clara had noticed. She'd noticed all of it. The careful distance Ethan maintained, the way he seemed to shrink from any moment that felt too warm or too comfortable, as if comfort itself was a betrayal of the suffering he'd chosen as his penance. People heal in their own time, Clara said, because it was the only thing she could offer. But what if they don't? Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. What if they just stay broken forever? Clara had no answer for that. She'd seen it before. People who wore their wounds like armor, who couldn't imagine existing without the pain that had become their identity. She'd been one of them once, after her parents died and her brothers scattered, and she'd found herself alone in a world that had no use for women without family or fortune. She'd survived by staying temporary, by never letting herself want permanence badly enough to grieve when it inevitably ended. Looking at Lily's worried face, she wondered if that had been survival or just a different kind of breaking. "Let's get these rolls in the oven," she said instead, "and then maybe you can show me those drawings you keep under your mattress." Lily's eyes went wide. "You knew about those?" "I'm observant, and I don't judge," Clara smiled. "I used to draw too when I was your age. Horses mostly. Terrible horses with legs going in impossible directions." "Mine are of Mama," Lily admitted. "I draw her so I won't forget what she looked like. But I'm not very good, and each time I draw her she looks a little different, and I don't know anymore which version is real and which one I'm making up." Clara's throat closed. She knelt down, bringing herself to Lily's level. "May I see them?" Lily nodded, solemn, and led Clara upstairs. The drawings were tucked in a careful stack beneath the mattress, dozens of them, executed in pencil and charcoal, some crude and others surprisingly skilled. A woman with long, dark hair, a woman smiling, a woman standing in the kitchen, a woman holding a small child. In every image, the face was slightly different, as if Lily was desperately trying to capture something that kept slipping away. She was beautiful, Clara said, because it was true. Even filtered through a child's imperfect memory and uncertain hand, the love in these drawings was palpable. "Papa won't talk about her," Lily said. "He put away all the photographs. I asked him once why, and he said it hurt too much to see her face. But now I'm forgetting, and I don't have anything except these, and they're not right. They're not her." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the drawings. "Do you want them to be right, or do you want them to be yours?" Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" "These drawings. They're not your mother exactly. They're your memory of her, your feeling of her, the way she lives in here." Clara touched her own chest. "That's not the same as a photograph, but it's not less real. It's just different, more true to what you carry." "But what if I get it wrong? What if I remember her wrong and lose what was real?" "You can't lose what was real," Clara said gently. "The real part is how she made you feel, safe, loved, warm. Those feelings don't need a perfect drawing or a photograph. They're already part of you." Lily stared at the drawings, then carefully took them back and tucked them under the mattress. "Papa needs to remember that too." "Maybe," Clara stood. "Or maybe he needs to learn that moving forward isn't the same as forgetting, that making new memories doesn't erase the old ones." "Is that what you're doing?" Lily looked up at her. "Making new memories?" Clara thought of the boarding house, the string of temporary positions, the careful way she'd trained herself not to want anything she couldn't carry in a carpet bag. "I'm trying," she said. Lily took her hand, small fingers surprisingly strong. "Good, because I like having you here. The house feels different now. Warmer, like it's waking up." They went back downstairs together, and Clara tried not to think about how easily her heart was already tangling itself around this fierce, lonely child who'd hired a stranger to fix her broken family. That night at dinner, Ethan actually looked at her. It was brief, just a moment when he passed the potatoes and their eyes met, but Clara saw something in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Not warmth, exactly. More like curiosity, wariness. The look of someone who'd noticed a change and wasn't sure whether to welcome it or run from it. "Good meal," he said. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Lily beamed at both of them like she'd orchestrated a diplomatic triumph. After Lily went to bed, Ethan lingered in the kitchen while Clara cleaned up. He didn't help, but he didn't leave either. He just stood by the window, coffee cup in hand, staring out at the darkness. "She seems happier," he said finally. "Lily. She's a good child. Easy to cook for. Easy to talk to." "She talks to you." Clara heard the hurt beneath the question. "Some. She misses you during the day, asks when you'll be back, watches the window." Ethan's jaw tightened. Work doesn't stop for wanting. "I know. I wasn't criticizing." "Weren't you?" Clara turned to face him, dish towel still in her hands. "No, I was stating a fact. She misses you. You're gone a lot. Those are both true, and neither is a judgment." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he hadn't since that first day. "You're different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" Someone temporary. Someone who'd last 2 weeks like the last one and then leave because the isolation was too much. He paused. Someone who'd want things I can't give. What things? Conversation, company, more than this. He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the life he'd built that was all function and no feeling. Most people can't stand the quiet. Clara thought of her years moving from place to place, of learning to carry her silence like a skill. I don't mind quiet. No, he said slowly. I don't think you do. They stood there in the lamplight, two people who'd learned to survive by expecting nothing, and something fragile trembled in the space between them. I should finish up, Clara said, breaking the moment. Ethan nodded and left the kitchen, but later that night Clara heard him moving around downstairs. Heard a door open that hadn't been opened since she'd arrived. Heard the soft sound of something being unwrapped. In the morning, there was a photograph on the mantel. A woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, holding a baby. Ethan standing beside her, younger, unguarded, his hand on her shoulder. Lily saw it first and went completely still. Then she turned and ran outside to where Ethan was feeding the horses. And Clara watched through the window as the child wrapped her arms around her father's waist and held on like she'd never let go. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, then slowly, carefully, put his arms around his daughter and held her back. When they came in for breakfast, neither of them mentioned the photograph. But Lily kept glancing at it with something like wonder, and Ethan's shoulders weren't quite as rigid as they'd been the day before. Progress, Clara thought. Small and fragile, but real. The next test came on Saturday, when a buggy rolled up the drive carrying 3 women from town. Clara was in the kitchen garden, harvesting the last of the winter carrots, when she heard the horses. Lily was beside her, supposedly helping, but mostly just digging holes. Oh no, Lily muttered. It's the pie brigade. The what? Women who bring pies and try to marry Papa. Lily stood up, dirt on her dress, glaring at the approaching buggy. They come every few weeks. They're all terrible. Clara brushed off her hands. Maybe they're just being neighborly. They're being husband hunters. Lily crossed her arms. You'll see. The women who emerged from the buggy were well-dressed and carefully coiffed. Clearly town women, not ranch wives. The one in front carried a covered basket and wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Hale, she called, though Ethan was nowhere in sight. We've come to call. Lily stepped forward, chin lifted. Papa's working. He's always working. You know that, Mrs. Thornton. Mrs. Thornton's smile tightened. Well, we brought a pie anyway. Apple, your father's favorite. And who is this? She focused on Clara with sharp interest. A new hired girl? Cook, Lily corrected. Miss Monroe is our cook. She lives here now. The 3 women exchanged glances that Clara couldn't quite read. Mrs. Thornton's smile became almost predatory. How lovely. I'm sure Mr. Hale appreciates the help. She turned back to Lily. Why don't you run and fetch your father, dear? We'll wait on the porch. He's mending the north fence. That's an hour's ride. Lily didn't budge. You can leave the pie if you want. We'll thank him for you. We'll wait, Mrs. Thornton said firmly. They settled onto the porch like occupying forces, and Clara found herself in the awkward position of hostess to women who were clearly sizing her up as competition for something she wasn't even competing for. She brought out coffee and leftover biscuits because hospitality demanded it, and endured their questions. Where are you from, dear? Prescott most recently. Before that, various places. Family? 3 brothers, all moved on to their own lives. And you're unmarried? This from the youngest of the 3, a blonde woman with calculating eyes. Yes. How fortunate for Mr. Hale having such a capable woman in the house. Mrs. Thornton's tone made capable sound like an insult, though I'm sure you understand your place as the hired help. Lily, who'd been sitting on the porch steps, stood up abruptly. Miss Monroe isn't help. She's family. The silence that followed was profound. Mrs. Thornton recovered first. That's sweet, dear, but you mustn't get too attached. Hired cooks come and go. It's the nature of the work. This one's staying, Lily said flatly. We'll see. Mrs. Thornton turned her attention back to Clara. Mr. Hale is a good man, a godly man. He deserves a proper wife, not just domestic assistance. Someone of standing in the community, someone who can help him raise his daughter appropriately. Clara saw where this was going and felt something cold settle in her chest. I'm sure Mr. Hale will make his own decisions about his future. Of course, but opportunities should be presented properly, by people of proper background and situation. Mrs. Thornton's meaning was crystal clear. You understand, I'm sure. A cook is a cook. A wife is something altogether different. Papa doesn't want a wife, Lily said loudly. He wants to be left alone. Lily, Clara said quietly. No, they come here with their pies and their fake smiles, and they talk about Papa like he's a prize to be won, and they don't actually care about him. They just want the ranch and someone to tell them they're important. Lily's voice shook. Miss Monroe actually cares. She cooks real food and helps with my braids and doesn't pretend to be something she's not. That's worth more than all your stupid pies. Mrs. Thornton's face went white, then red. How dare you speak to me that way? I'm a respectable woman trying to help your father. You're a vulture, Lily said, and you can leave now. The three women stood in unison, offended dignity radiating from them like heat. We'll speak to your father about your behavior, Mrs. Thornton said icily, and about the unsuitable influences in this household. They climbed into their buggy and departed in a cloud of dust and wounded pride, and Clara stood on the porch beside a 6-year-old child who'd just defended her honor against the respectable women of Prescott. You didn't have to do that, Clara said quietly. Yes, I did. Lily crossed her arms. They were being mean, and they were wrong. You're not just a cook. Then what am I? Lily looked up at her, fierce and certain. You're the person who's teaching this house how to be a home again. That's more important than anything they'll ever do. Clara pulled Lily into a hug, and the child clung to her with desperate strength. And somewhere in the middle of that embrace, Clara felt something shift in her own carefully guarded heart. When Ethan came in that evening, Lily told him the whole story with dramatic embellishments. Clara tried to downplay it, but Lily was having none of it. They were terrible to her, Papa. They called her hired help, like it was an insult, and they said you needed a proper wife. And Mrs. Thornton looked at Miss Monroe like she was dirt. Ethan's expression went very still. And what did you say? I told them Miss Monroe was family and they could leave. Lily, I'm not sorry. Lily lifted her chin. They were disrespectful. Mama wouldn't have tolerated it, and neither should you. Ethan looked at Clara, something complicated in his eyes. I apologize. The women from town, they mean well, but they think a widower needs managing, Clara finished. It's all right. I understand. Do you? I've been just the help before. It's not new. It shouldn't be that way here. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. Lily's right. You're not just help. He struggled for words. You're making a difference, a real one, and that deserves respect. Clara felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay, if you want to. If this is... He gestured vaguely at the house, the life, the complicated tangle of grief and healing they were all caught in. If this is tolerable. It's more than tolerable, Clara said, and meant it. That night, after Lily was asleep, Clara sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about belonging. She'd spent so many years being temporary, the cook who'd leave in 6 months, the help who'd move on when something better came along, the woman who kept her carpetbag ready because staying too long meant wanting too much, and wanting too much meant eventual disappointment. But Lily had called her family. Ethan had asked her to stay, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt the weight of her own loneliness pressing against the possibility of something different. The next morning, she moved her carpetbag from beside the door to the back of the closet. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable. But Lily saw it, and smiled, and said nothing. And Clara understood that she'd just made a choice she couldn't easily unmake, to stop being temporary, to stop protecting herself with the promise of inevitable departure, to risk wanting this strange, broken family to somehow become whole. The winter deepened. Snow came early, blanketing the ranch in white silence. The isolation that had driven away the previous cook settled over them like a held breath, But Clara found she didn't mind. She baked bread and mended clothes and taught Lily to read more difficult books. She cooked meals that made Ethan pause with his fork halfway to his mouth, remembering what it felt like to be cared for. And slowly, carefully, the house began to warm. Ethan started coming in for lunch, saying he needed to check something in the barn, but really just wanting the hot soup and the company. He began to talk more at dinner. Nothing deep, just observations about the ranch, the weather, the cattle. But it was conversation, and it mattered. Lily bloomed like a plant, finally getting enough water. She laughed more, played more, stopped watching her father with that worried intensity that had made her seem so much older than 6. And Clara stopped counting the days until spring, stopped cataloging escape routes, stopped holding herself at a distance from the life unfolding around her. She didn't know yet what they were becoming to each other. This grieving man, this fierce child, this woman who'd been hired by accident and stayed by choice. But she knew it was something fragile and real, something worth protecting, something that might, against all odds, become the home none of them had dared to hope for. The shift came gradually, like ice melting at the edges of a frozen river, so subtle that Clara didn't realize how much had changed until the day Ethan laughed. It was a Thursday afternoon in late February. Clara was rolling out pie dough while Lily sat at the table practicing her letters, tongue stuck out in concentration. Ethan had come in early to fix a broken hinge on the pantry door, and somehow the repair had stretched into him staying for coffee, then helping Lily sound out a particularly difficult word, then lingering by the window watching Clara work. "What kind of pie?" he asked. "Dried apple. I found some good ones in the cellar." "Mama used to make apple pie," Lily said without looking up from her slate. "But hers had cinnamon, lots of it." Clara glanced at Ethan, saw the familiar tightness in his jaw that came whenever Lily mentioned her mother. But this time, instead of leaving the room or changing the subject, he spoke. "She'd use a whole stick on one pie. Said if you could still taste the apple more than the cinnamon, you hadn't used enough." Clara smiled. "Sounds like a woman who knew what she wanted." "She did." Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. "She was stubborn about the strangest things. Cinnamon in pie. The correct way to fold sheets, making sure every single bean was sorted before cooking because one bad one could ruin the whole pot." He paused. "I used to tease her about it." "What did she say?" Lily had set down her slate, listening with hungry attention. "She'd tell me that details mattered, that doing things right was how you showed respect for the work and the people you were doing it for." Ethan's mouth quirked, almost a smile. "Then she'd make me help her sort beans to teach me patience." "Did it work?" Clara asked. "No, I was terrible at it, rushed through and missed half the bad ones." He actually did smile then, small and brief but real. "She'd sigh and make me start over, and I'd complain, and she'd kiss me on the forehead and tell me I was hopeless, but she loved me anyway." The kitchen went very quiet. Lily was staring at her father with something like wonder, and Clara's hands had stilled on the rolling pin. "I forgot that," Ethan said softly, more to himself than to them. "I forgot how she used to kiss my forehead when I was being stubborn. How did I forget that?" "You didn't forget," Lily said. "You just stopped letting yourself remember." Ethan looked at his daughter, and something passed between them, understanding, forgiveness, shared grief that was finally beginning to soften at the edges. "I'll use extra cinnamon," Clara said quietly, "if that's all right." "Yeah." Ethan cleared his throat. "That would be good." He went back to fixing the hinge, but the atmosphere in the kitchen had changed, lighter somehow. As if speaking about his wife without falling apart had lifted a weight none of them had realized he was carrying. That evening, when Clara served the pie, Lily took one bite and closed her eyes. "It tastes like Mama's," she whispered. "Almost exactly." Ethan ate his slice slowly, deliberately, and when he looked at Clara, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice was steady. "Thank you." Clara understood that he wasn't just thanking her for the pie. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, Mrs. Thornton returned, and this time she wasn't alone. Clara was beating rugs on the porch when the buggy arrived, carrying not just Mrs. Thornton, but a striking woman in an expensive traveling suit, her blonde hair perfectly arranged beneath a feathered hat. "Mr. Hale!" Mrs. Thornton called as Ethan emerged from the barn. "I've brought Mrs. Victoria Ashford to meet you. She's recently widowed and has expressed interest in settling in our area." The woman, Victoria, smiled at Ethan with practiced charm. "Mr. Hale, I've heard so much about your ranch and your situation." Clara saw Ethan's shoulders tense, saw the way his jaw tightened. "Ma'am," he said politely but coldly, "I'm afraid I'm busy this afternoon." "Oh, we won't take much of your time," Mrs. Thornton said quickly. "Mrs. Ashford has come all the way from Denver. She's from a very prominent family, very well connected. Her late husband left her quite comfortable, but she seeks the quieter life of ranch country." "Then I wish her well in finding it," Ethan said. "But as I said, I'm busy." Victoria's smile didn't falter. "I understand you have a daughter. How lovely. I've always adored children, though I was never blessed with my own." She looked past him to where Lily had appeared in the doorway. "What a darling little thing, though she could use some refinement, perhaps proper schooling in town. I'm sure a man in your position finds it difficult to provide adequate education out here in the wilderness." Lily's expression went stony. Clara set down the rug beater and moved closer. "My daughter is perfectly well educated," Ethan said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I'm sure you do your best," Victoria said with patronizing kindness. "But a child needs a mother's influence, especially a girl. Without proper guidance, they become so rough around the edges." "I think you should leave," Ethan said. Mrs. Thornton stepped forward quickly. "Now, Mr. Hale, there's no need to be hasty. Mrs. Ashford is merely offering to help. She has resources, connections, experience in society. I don't need society. I need to get back to work." "You need a wife," Victoria said bluntly, dropping the pretense of charm. "Let's not dance around it. You're a widower with a young daughter, running a substantial ranch alone. I'm a widow with means and social standing. We could come to an arrangement that would benefit both of us." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't courtship. This was a business proposal. "I'm not interested in arrangements," Ethan said. "Don't be foolish. Your daughter needs proper raising. This house needs a woman of quality. And you—" Victoria's gaze raked over him, calculating. "You need someone who can elevate your standing, someone who can open doors, someone who isn't just a—" Her eyes flicked to Clara, dismissive. "Domestic servant playing house." The silence that followed was razor sharp. Lily spoke first, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Miss Monroe isn't playing house. She is our house, and you're not welcome in it." "Lily," Ethan said quietly. "No, Papa. I won't be polite to people who are rude to us." Lily stepped fully onto the porch, small and fierce. "You called Miss Monroe a servant like it was something shameful. But she works harder than you ever have. She cooks and cleans and takes care of us because she cares, not because she wants something. And she makes Papa smile, which you never could, because you don't actually like him. You just like what he has." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me that way, you little brat? That's enough." Ethan's voice cracked like a whip. "Get off my property, now." "You're making a mistake," Mrs. Thornton said urgently. "Mrs. Ashford is offering you an opportunity. I don't want it. I don't want her. And I don't want either of you coming back here." Ethan moved to stand beside Lily, his hand on her shoulder. "My daughter and I are doing fine. We have what we need." Victoria's expression turned vicious. "You have a cook who's clearly overstepped her bounds, and a child who's being raised like a wild animal. This is what happens when men try to manage households without proper guidance. You're both going to ruin, and it's your own stubborn pride that will do it." "Leave," Ethan said, and there was steel in his voice that made even Victoria take a step back. They left in a flurry of indignation and veiled threats about speaking to the territorial governor and reporting unsuitable living conditions for children. And when the buggy finally disappeared down the road, Lily turned to her father. "I'm not sorry." "I know." Ethan pulled her against his side. "Neither am I. She was horrible, and she was wrong about Miss Monroe." "Yes, she was." They both looked at Clara, who was still standing on the porch with the rug beater in her hand, feeling like she'd just survived a small war. "I apologize," Ethan said. "You shouldn't have had to hear that. It's not the first time someone's looked down on me for my work. Clara said quietly. It probably won't be the last. It shouldn't happen in your own home. The words hung in the air between them. Your own home. Not this house or while you're working here. Home. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Lily's right. You've made this place. Ethan struggled for words. You've made it feel like it should. Like it hasn't felt since. He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. Lily grabbed Clara's hand. Can we make cookies? I want cookies after that terrible woman. Clara laughed, shaky but real. Yes, we can make cookies. They went inside and Ethan followed, and for the first time since Clara had arrived, he stayed in the kitchen while they worked. Not helping exactly, he sat at the table mending tack, leather, and tools spread before him, but present. Part of the rhythm of the household instead of separate from it. Lily chattered while measuring flour, telling Clara about the book she was reading, asking questions about how cookies worked, speculating about whether Mrs. Thornton would actually contact the territorial governor. She won't, Ethan said without looking up from his work. She's bluffing, trying to scare us. But what if she does? Lily asked. What if they say I need to go to school in town or that Papa can't take care of me properly? Then we'll deal with it. Ethan's voice was calm, certain. But no one's taking you anywhere. You're my daughter, and this is your home, and nobody gets to tell us how to live. What about Miss Monroe? Lily's question was quiet but pointed. Do they get to tell her to leave? Ethan's hand stilled on the leather. He looked up at Clara, and she saw something raw in his expression. Fear, maybe, or the beginning of something he wasn't ready to name. No, he said, they don't. Clara turned back to the cookie dough, her heart beating too fast. She pressed shapes out of the rolled dough, focusing on the simple task, trying not to read too much into words that might not mean what she desperately wanted them to mean. When the cookies were in the oven, Lily tugged on Clara's sleeve. Can you braid my hair? The ribbons came loose. Clara sat at the table and Lily settled between her knees, and Clara's fingers worked through the dark hair with practiced gentleness. Across the table, Ethan had abandoned his tack work and was watching them with an expression Clara couldn't quite interpret. You're good with her, he said quietly. She's easy to care for. Still, not everyone would... He paused. Most people who come here see isolation and work and nothing else. They don't see what Lily needs, what this place needs. His eyes met hers. You saw it, right from the start. Maybe I recognized it, Clara said carefully, tying off Lily's braid with ribbon. Because I needed the same things. What do you need? The question was too direct, too honest. Clara's hand stilled in Lily's hair. Somewhere to belong, she said finally. Somewhere that isn't temporary. Is that what this is? Ethan's voice was rough. For you? Clara looked at him across the kitchen table, this man who'd been broken by grief and was slowly learning how to put himself back together. She looked at Lily, who'd orchestrated her arrival out of desperate love for her father. She looked at the kitchen that had become hers, the house that had started to feel like home despite every promise she'd made herself about staying temporary. I hope so, she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something he'd been afraid to ask. Good, because I don't. He swallowed hard. I don't want you to leave. I know that's selfish, and I know I'm not offering anything except more isolation and hard work in a complicated situation, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. I'm already staying, Clara said. I mean, really stay. Not just until something better comes along. Not just because Lily hired you and you're too kind to abandon us. Stay because... He struggled with the words, his hands clenching on the edge of the table. Because we need you. Because I need you. The confession seemed to cost him something. He looked away, jaw tight, like he'd revealed too much. Lily twisted around to look at Clara, her eyes bright. Please say yes. Clara felt her careful defenses crumbling, all the walls she'd built to protect herself from wanting too much, from risking too much. She'd spent years being the cook who'd leave in 6 months, the temporary help, the woman who kept her carpetbag packed. She'd told herself it was survival, but looking at these two people who'd somehow become essential to her, she understood it had just been fear. Yes, she said. I'll stay. Lily threw her arms around Clara's waist, and Ethan's expression shifted into something that might have been relief or hope, or both. The cookies burned slightly because they forgot about them in the moment, but none of them cared. They ate them anyway, scraped dark bottoms and all, and Lily declared them the best cookies she'd ever had. And Ethan smiled, really smiled. And Clara thought that maybe this was what healing looked like. Not dramatic revelation or sudden transformation, but small moments of choosing each other, of deciding that belonging was worth the risk. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan found Clara in the kitchen cleaning up. "I need to explain something," he said. Clara set down her dishcloth. "All right. When Sarah died, my wife, I didn't just lose her. I lost everything. The future we'd planned, the life we were building, my sense of who I was." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed like he needed the physical barrier. "I told myself the only way to survive was to stop wanting anything, to just work and raise Lily and not let myself feel too much because feeling meant hurting, and I couldn't handle any more hurt." Clara waited, letting him find the words at his own pace. "But then you came, and you just started fixing things. Not fixing me, I know I'm still a mess, but fixing the house. Making it warm again, making Lily laugh again, and I realized I was angry about it. Angry? Because it meant I had to feel things again, had to admit that maybe I wanted more than just survival, and that terrified me." He looked at her directly. "It still terrifies me." "I understand," Clara said softly. "I've spent years being afraid of wanting permanence, of hoping for something that might not last. So, where does that leave us?" Clara thought about it. Two broken people, both terrified of hope, both trying to build something real out of their shared wreckage. "Honest," she said finally. "It leaves us honest. About what we can offer and what we need. About being scared and wanting it anyway." "I can't promise I'll be easy," Ethan said. "I'm still grieving. I still have days where I can barely function, and I can't love the way I did before. That part of me, Sarah took it with her." "I'm not asking you to love me the way you loved her," Clara said. "I'm asking you to let me stay, to build something new instead of trying to recreate what was lost." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then, "I can do that, if you're patient with me. I can be patient. And if you can accept that this won't look like a normal courtship or a normal marriage or whatever we're building toward, it'll be complicated. Complicated I can handle." Clara stepped closer. "Ethan, I'm not some young girl looking for romance and grand gestures. I'm a 32-year-old woman who spent her whole adult life moving from place to place because she was too afraid to plant roots. I don't need perfect. I need real." "Real," he echoed. "I can do real. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and took her hand. His palm was calloused, his grip uncertain, but he held on like she was an anchor in a storm. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for caring about Lily, for not giving up on us when you had every reason to." "I didn't do it for thanks," Clara said. "I did it because this stopped being a job somewhere along the way. It became," she struggled for words, "home, family, things I didn't think I'd ever have again." They stood there in the lamplight, holding hands like awkward children, and Clara understood that this was the beginning of something fragile and precious. Not a fairy tale romance, not a simple solution to complicated grief, but two people choosing each other despite fear and brokenness and uncertainty. It was enough. More than enough. It was real. The following weeks brought a subtle shift in the household dynamics. Ethan didn't suddenly become demonstrative or openly affectionate, but he started coming in for lunch every day, started lingering after dinner to help with dishes, started asking Clara's opinion on ranch decisions. Small things, but they mattered. Lily watched it all with satisfaction, like a general observing her battle plans coming to fruition. "I told you it would work," she said one afternoon while helping Clara shell peas. "What would work? Getting Papa to see that you belong here, that we're better with you than without you." Clara smiled. "You're very pleased with yourself." "I should be. I hired you. I picked you out of all the people who might have answered that advertisement, and I was right." Lily popped a pea into her mouth. You're perfect for us. Nobody's perfect, sweetheart. Perfect for us, Lily corrected. That's different. It means you fit, like the last piece in a puzzle. Clara thought about that, about fitting, about being the piece that completed something instead of just passing through. It was a new way of thinking about herself, and she wasn't sure she'd earned it yet, but she wanted to, desperately. Your papa and I are taking things slow, Clara said carefully. You know that, right? We're not rushing into anything. I know, but you're not leaving either. That's what matters. No, Clara agreed. I'm not leaving. Lily smiled and went back to shelling peas, and Clara added the moment to her growing collection of small confirmations that she'd made the right choice in staying, that this strange family she'd stumbled into might actually become hers. That evening, Ethan came in with wildflowers, early spring blooms he'd found growing near the creek. He set them on the table without ceremony, without explanation, but his ears were red and he wouldn't quite meet Clara's eyes. Lily saw them and grinned. Papa, are those for Miss Monroe? They're for the table, Ethan said gruffly. House looks better with flowers. Uh-huh. Lily's grin widened. That's definitely why you picked them. Don't you have studying to do? Nope. I finished already. Ethan gave his daughter a look that said he knew exactly what she was doing, and Lily gave him one back that said she didn't care. And Clara arranged the wildflowers in a mason jar and pretended her heart wasn't doing complicated things in her chest. This was how it would be, she thought. Not grand romantic gestures, but wildflowers picked on the way home from mending fence. Not passionate declarations, but quiet requests to stay. Not a love story like the ones in books, but something real and earned and built slowly from shared grief and shared hope. She could live with that. More than that, she could build a life with it. And as spring crept closer and the house grew warmer and Lily's laughter filled the rooms that had been silent for too long, Clara allowed herself to believe that sometimes broken things could be mended, that sometimes lonely people could find each other, and that sometimes the most unlikely families were the ones that mattered most. The wildflowers lasted nearly 2 weeks before their petals began to drop, and by then Ethan had brought more: columbines from the high meadow, Indian paintbrush from the southern pasture, once even a handful of violets so delicate Clara was afraid to touch them. He never said anything when he set them on the table, never acknowledged what the gesture meant, but his eyes would find hers across the room and something unspoken would pass between them. Lily noticed everything and commented on none of it, though her satisfied smiles spoke volumes. Spring arrived properly in early April, bringing mud and new calves and work that stretched from dawn until well past dark. Ethan would come in exhausted, dirt under his fingernails, and weariness etched in every line of his face, and Clara would have hot food waiting and coffee strong enough to revive the dead. Some nights he was too tired to talk, just ate in grateful silence and dragged himself upstairs. Other nights he'd linger, helping Lily with her arithmetic or asking Clara about her day, and those nights felt like small victories against the isolation that had nearly consumed him. But the peace was fragile, and Clara should have known it couldn't last. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a territorial marshal who rode up to the house with official documents and an apologetic expression. "Mr. Hale," he said, dismounting, "I'm Marshal Davies. I'm afraid I have some unpleasant business." Ethan had been shoeing a horse. He set down the hoof and straightened slowly, wariness radiating from him. "What kind of business?" "A formal complaint has been filed regarding the welfare of your daughter. Allegations of inadequate supervision, unsuitable living conditions, and improper moral influence in the household." Marshal Davies looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm required to investigate and file a report with the territorial court." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Lily had been playing in the yard but had gone very still, listening. "Who filed the complaint?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "A Mrs. Victoria Ashford and Mrs. Eleanor Thornton. They claim," he consulted the document, "that your daughter is being raised without proper feminine guidance, that she's wild and undisciplined, and that the presence of an unmarried woman of questionable background living in the home presents an immoral environment for a child." The words hung in the air like poison. "That's a lie," Lily said loudly, stepping forward. "Miss Monroe is good and kind, and she takes better care of me than anyone except Papa." I'm sure she does, sweetheart, Marshal Davies said gently. But I still have to investigate. It's the law. The law is stupid, Lily said fiercely. Lily, inside, Ethan said. But Papa, inside, now. Lily looked between her father and the marshal, her small face twisted with anger and fear, then ran into the house. Clara heard the door slam. I apologize for this, Marshal Davies said. I know the women who filed the complaint, and I know their motivations are questionable. But my hands are tied. I need to inspect the property, interview the child, and speak with Miss Monroe. Clara did nothing wrong, Ethan said. She's a cook. She lives here as an employee. Everything is completely proper. I believe you, but I still need to verify. May I come inside? What followed was the most humiliating hour of Clara's life. She stood in the kitchen she'd cleaned and organized and made her own while Marshal Davies examined every corner, asked invasive questions about sleeping arrangements and supervision and her relationship with Ethan. He was kind about it, apologetic even, but that didn't make it less mortifying. Lily refused to cooperate, sitting at the table with her arms crossed and answering every question with hostile silence until Ethan gently coaxed her into speaking. Miss Monroe takes care of you? Marshal Davies asked. Yes. Feed you properly? Make sure you're clean and dressed appropriately? Yes. Are you happy here? Lily's chin trembled. I was. Until terrible people started trying to ruin everything. Lily, Ethan said quietly. It's true, Papa. Mrs. Ashford and Mrs. Thornton don't care about me. They just want to get rid of Miss Monroe so one of them can marry you and take our ranch. Lily's voice broke. And now they're using the law to do it because we wouldn't let them bully us. Marshal Davies sighed. I understand your frustration, but the law exists to protect children, even when it's misused by adults with other motives. He made notes in his ledger. Mr. Hale, I'll be honest with you. The complaint is flimsy and clearly motivated by personal grievance, but it's going to attract attention. The territorial judge will want to review the situation personally. What does that mean? Clara asked. It means there will be a hearing, probably in 2 weeks. You'll need to present your household to the court and demonstrate that the child is being properly cared for. He looked at Clara with sympathy. And you'll need to defend your presence here and your character. Mrs. Ashford has implied that your relationship with Mr. Hale is inappropriate. Clara's face burned. We have no relationship beyond that of employer and employee. I believe you, but you'll need to convince the judge. Marshal Davies closed his ledger. My recommendation will be that the complaint is unfounded, but the final decision isn't mine. After he left, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Lily sat at the table, tears streaming down her face, and Ethan stood by the window with his hands clenched into fists. This is my fault, Clara said quietly. If I leave, the complaint goes away. No, Lily said fiercely. No, you're not leaving. Lily's right, Ethan said without turning around. You leaving is exactly what they want. We're not giving them that satisfaction. But if the judge rules against you, you could lose Lily. Then we'll fight. Ethan turned to face her, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. We'll go to the hearing and we'll tell the truth, and if the judge has any sense at all, he'll see through their lies. And if he doesn't, then we'll figure something out. Ethan moved to the table, sat down beside his daughter, and pulled her against his side. But we're not letting them win. We're not letting them destroy this family just because it doesn't look the way they think it should. Clara sank into a chair, her hands shaking. I never meant to cause trouble. I just wanted to help. You did help, Lily said, wiping her eyes. You saved us. And now we're going to save you back. The determination in the child's voice would have been touching if the situation weren't so dire. Clara looked at these two people who'd become her family and felt fear claw at her chest. She'd spent so many years being temporary specifically to avoid this, the pain of belonging to something that could be taken away. We need a plan, Ethan said. We need to present ourselves as a proper household, respectable, beyond reproach. We are respectable, Lily protested. I know that, you know that, but we need to make sure the judge knows it too. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. All right. He looked at her, and she saw fear and determination and something else she couldn't quite name in his eyes. Marry me. The world tilted. What? Marry me. Not for love or romance or any of the reasons people usually marry. Marry me because it solves the problem. If you're my wife instead of my employee, there's no impropriety, no question of moral influence. The complaint becomes meaningless. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. Ethan, I know it's not fair to ask. I know it's not what you signed up for. But I'm asking anyway because I can't lose Lily, and I can't— He swallowed hard. I can't lose you either. Not when you've become so essential to us. You want a marriage of convenience, Clara said slowly. A legal arrangement to satisfy the court. Yes. And after the hearing, when the threat is gone? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe we stay married because it's easier than explaining otherwise. Maybe we build something real out of a practical arrangement. Or maybe— He met her eyes. Maybe it's already real, and this is just making it official. Lily was watching both of them with wide eyes, barely breathing. Clara thought about the wildflowers that appeared on the table every week, about the way Ethan's hand would brush hers when he helped with dishes, about the quiet conversations in the lamplight, and the way he'd started to smile again, cautious and rare, but genuine. About Lily calling her family and meaning it. She thought about the carpet bag she'd moved to the back of the closet, about the choice she'd already made to stop being temporary, about the fact that leaving now would break something in her that might never heal. Yes, she said, I'll marry you. Lily let out a sound between a laugh and a sob and launched herself at Clara, wrapping her arms around her waist. You mean it? Really? Really? Clara hugged her back, looking at Ethan over the child's head. I mean it. Ethan's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to identify, landing finally on relief so profound it made him look younger. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to convince a judge that this is real. It is real, Lily said, pulling back to look at both of them. Maybe it started practical, but it's real now. Anyone with eyes can see that. Clara hoped the judge would have eyes. They were married 3 days later in the Prescott courthouse, with Marshal Davies serving as witness and looking relieved that they'd found a solution. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. No flowers or music or celebration. Clara wore her best dress, plain blue calico, carefully mended, and Ethan wore the same suit he'd worn to his first wedding, and neither of them could quite look at each other when they said their vows. But when the judge pronounced them married and Ethan slipped a simple gold band on her finger, his hand was steady and his eyes held hers with something that looked like a promise. Lily cried happy tears and declared it the best wedding ever, even though there was no cake and no guests and no joy in it beyond the desperate relief of a problem temporarily solved. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and everything was the same and everything was different. That night, Clara lay in her small room above the kitchen and stared at the wedding ring on her finger. She'd become a wife to a man who didn't love her, a mother to a child who wasn't hers, part of a family held together by necessity and fear and the thinnest thread of genuine affection. She should have felt trapped, should have resented the situation that had forced this choice. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to hope. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. The days leading up to it were tense and strange. Ethan moved through his work with grim determination, and Clara cleaned the already clean house until every surface gleamed. Lily was unusually quiet, watching both of them with worried eyes. On Tuesday evening, Ethan asked Clara to join him on the porch after Lily went to bed. They sat in the rocking chairs his wife had chosen years ago, and the silence stretched between them like something alive. I need to apologize, Ethan said finally, for putting you in this position, for asking you to marry me for all the wrong reasons. Were they the wrong reasons? Clara asked quietly. I married you to protect Lily, to keep the court from taking her away. That's not how marriage should work. No, Clara agreed. But it's honest. And you did say we'd build something real out of this. Did I trap you into that? Into hoping for something I might not be able to give? Clara looked at her wedding ring, simple and plain in the lamplight. You gave me a choice. I could have said no. I could have left and let you figure out another solution. But you stayed. I stayed because I wanted to. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about survival and started being about— She struggled for words. About choosing the life I wanted instead of just accepting whatever came. Ethan turned to look at her, really look, and she saw vulnerability in his face that made her chest ache. What life do you want, Clara? She thought about the question, about the years of temporary rooms and temporary jobs, and telling herself that not belonging anywhere was freedom. About the moment she'd walked up to this house and met a 6-year-old girl with desperate hope in her eyes. About learning to make a home instead of just a living. This one, she said simply. I want this life, this house, this family. Even if it started for the wrong reasons, even if it's complicated and messy and not what anyone planned, I want it. Even with me? The question was barely a whisper. Even knowing I'm still broken, that I might never be able to love you the way you deserve? I don't need you to love me like you loved Sarah, Clara said. I just need you to let me stay, to build something new instead of trying to recreate what was lost. Can you do that? Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I think I'm already doing it. I just didn't realize until now. What do you mean? The wildflowers. Asking your opinion on ranch decisions, looking forward to coming in for lunch just because you'll be there. He rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable with the honesty. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being the cook Lily hired and became essential. I don't know when it happened, but I know I can't imagine this place without you anymore. Claire's throat tightened. That's not love, Ethan. That's just need. Maybe need is where love starts, he said quietly. Maybe it grows from needing each other until one day you realize you'd choose each other even if you didn't have to. Even if there was no practical reason. You'd choose them just because they're them. Is that what you're saying? That you'd choose me? He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band he'd placed there days ago. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They sat there in the darkness, holding hands like uncertain lovers, and Clara understood that this was the real beginning. Not the hasty wedding or the desperate arrangement, but this moment of choosing each other with clear eyes and honest hearts. Tomorrow, she said, we go before the judge and we tell the truth, that we're a family, that Lily is loved and cared for, that this household might not look conventional, but it's good and real and worth protecting. What if he doesn't believe us? Then we fight harder. Clara squeezed his hand. But I don't think it'll come to that. People can usually tell the difference between something fake and something real. And this, she gestured to the house, to themselves, to the life they were building. This is real. Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, brief and chaste, but deliberate. Thank you for staying, for marrying me, for choosing us when you had every reason not to. Thank you for asking, Clara said, for giving me a reason to stop running. They stayed on the porch until the night air grew cold, not talking, just sitting together in the darkness like two people learning how to be less alone. The next morning, they dressed in their best clothes and drove the 12 miles to Prescott with Lily between them on the wagon seat. The child was unusually quiet, her small hand gripping Clara's tightly. The courthouse was an imposing building for such a small town, all dark wood and serious faces. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking man in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through any lie. Mrs. Ashford and Mrs. Thornton sat on one side of the courtroom, both dressed expensively and wearing expressions of righteous certainty. They looked at Clara with contempt and at Ethan with proprietary interest, and Clara felt her spine straighten with anger. The proceeding began. Mrs. Ashford's lawyer, a slick man from Denver, presented their case with dramatic flair. The isolated ranch, the inadequate education, the unmarried woman living under the same roof as a widower and his impressionable daughter, the moral danger, the unsuitable environment. And now, the lawyer said with theatrical disgust, we discover they've hastily married to avoid these very legitimate concerns. A marriage of obvious convenience designed to circumvent the law's protection of children. Judge Morrison looked at Ethan and Clara. Is this true? Did you marry in response to this complaint? Ethan stood, and Clara saw him struggle to find the right words. But before he could speak, Lily jumped to her feet. "Your Honor, may I say something?" The judge blinked, surprised. "Young lady, please, this is about me, and I should get to talk about my own life." Judge Morrison looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Lily's fierce determination made him nod. "Very well, briefly." Lily stepped forward, small and brave and absolutely unafraid. "Those women," she pointed at Mrs. Ashford and Mrs. Thornton, "they don't care about me. They never did. They came to our ranch trying to make Papa marry one of them so they could have our land and our money. When he said no, they got angry. When Miss Monroe, when Clara, stayed and made our house feel like a home again, they got even angrier, so they used the law to try to hurt us." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Morrison said. "It's the truth. Ask Marshal Davies. He investigated and said the complaint was flimsy and motivated by personal grievance. Ask anyone in town who knows us. Ask our neighbors." Lily's voice shook but stayed strong. "Clara didn't marry Papa just because of this hearing. She married him because she loves us, because we're a family. Maybe we don't look like other families, but we're real and we're good and we take care of each other." "The child has been coached," Mrs. Ashford said sharply. "I haven't been coached." Lily spun to face her. "I'm telling the truth, which is something you don't know how to do. You called Clara unsuitable and questioned her morals, but she's the best person I know. She cooks and cleans and helps me with my lessons and braids my hair and makes Papa smile again after 2 years of him being so sad I thought he might disappear. And maybe they got married fast, but lots of people on the frontier do that. It doesn't make it fake. It makes it practical and smart and exactly what we needed." Judge Morrison held up a hand. "That's enough. Young lady, please sit down." Lily sat, but her chin stayed lifted in defiance. The judge looked at the assembled parties, then at the documents before him. "Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, please approach." They stood together, and Clara felt Ethan's hand find hers, their fingers lacing together. "Tell me about your marriage," Judge Morrison said. "The truth, not what you think I want to hear." Ethan took a breath. "The truth is, we married quickly because of this complaint. But the truth is also that Clara had already become family before we made it legal. She came to our ranch last winter, hired by my daughter without my knowledge. And she stayed because she saw what we needed and decided to help. She's made our house a home again. She's given Lily the care and attention and warmth that I couldn't provide alone. And somewhere in all of that, she became essential. Not just useful, essential." "And you, Mrs. Hale?" The judge turned to Clara. "Why did you marry this man?" Clara looked at Ethan, at his honest eyes and work-worn hands, and the hope he was trying so hard to hide. She looked at Lily, watching her with desperate faith. She looked at the 2 women who'd tried to destroy them out of spite and greed. Then she looked at the judge and told the truth. "I married him because I wanted to. Because he and Lily had become my family, and I'd rather fight to keep them than walk away to save myself trouble. Because a practical marriage built on mutual respect and genuine care is worth more than a romantic one built on lies and manipulation." She glanced at Mrs. Ashford. "And because I'd rather be a rancher's wife who earns her place through hard work than a social climber who schemes her way into someone else's life." The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison stared at Clara for a long moment, then at Ethan, then at Lily. Finally, he looked at the documents before him and made a single, decisive note. "The complaint is dismissed," he said flatly. "The child is clearly well cared for, the household is respectable, and this court will not be used as a weapon in petty social disputes." He fixed Mrs. Ashford and Mrs. Thornton with a stern glare. "Ladies, if you file another frivolous complaint in my court, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand?" They left in a fury of rustling silk and wounded pride, and Lily let out a whoop of triumph that echoed through the courthouse. Outside in the spring sunshine, Clara felt like she could finally breathe. "We won," Lily said, dancing in circles. "We won, and they lost, and everything's going to be okay now." Ethan pulled Clara close, right there on the courthouse steps, with half of Prescott watching, and kissed her forehead with such tenderness that she felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for fighting for us." "Always," Clara whispered back. "I'll always fight for us." And in that moment, Surrounded by curious townspeople and bathed in sunlight, Clara understood that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all those years of wandering. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but something real and hard-won and entirely hers. A family, a home, a place to belong. They celebrated that night with a real wedding supper, though Clara had to cook it herself because there was no one else to do it. Lily insisted on setting the table with the good china that had been packed away since Sarah died, and she picked wildflowers for a centerpiece, and she wore her best dress even though it was just the three of them. "This is how it should have been the first time," Lily announced, arranging forks with serious concentration. "A proper wedding dinner for a proper family." Ethan caught Clara's eye across the kitchen, and something warm passed between them. Not love exactly, not yet, but the foundation upon which love could be built. Trust, respect, the beginning of genuine affection. Clara roasted a chicken with herbs from the garden she'd planted, made buttermilk biscuits that rose high and golden, prepared green beans with bacon, and baked an apple pie with extra cinnamon the way Sarah used to make it. It felt right somehow, honoring the woman who'd come before while creating something new. When they sat down to eat, Lily raised her water glass solemnly. "I want to make a toast." "You're 6, Ethan said, but he was smiling. "I'm 6, and I'm the reason we're all here, so I get to make a toast." Lily stood up, her glass held high. "To Papa, for being brave enough to let someone new into his heart. To Clara, for seeing what we needed and staying even when it was hard. And to Mama," her voice wavered slightly, "for teaching Papa how to love so he could do it again someday." Ethan's hand tightened on his glass, and Clara saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "To family," Lily finished, "the kind we're born with and the kind we choose." They clinked glasses, and Clara had to blink back tears because this child, this fierce, scheming, impossibly wise child, had orchestrated all of this, had seen a problem and solved it with nothing but determination and egg money and an advertisement in a newspaper. After dinner, Ethan pulled a package from behind the stove where he'd hidden it that morning. "I got you something. For the wedding. The real one." Clara unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a shawl, fine wool in deep blue, soft as a whisper. Not practical ranch wear, but something beautiful, something chosen specifically for her. "Ethan, this is too much. It's not nearly enough." He helped her drape it around her shoulders, his hands lingering at her neck. "You've given us everything. Let me give you something back." Clara touched the soft wool, overwhelmed. "Thank you. There's something else." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph in a silver frame. The image of Sarah holding baby Lily, the same one that now sat on the mantel. "I want you to have this, not to replace it on the mantel, but to keep. So you know I'm not trying to erase her or pretend she didn't exist. She was part of my life, and that made me who I am. But you're part of my life now, and I don't want you to ever think you're competing with a ghost." Clara took the photograph with trembling hands. Sarah looked happy in the image, radiant with new motherhood, and Clara felt no jealousy, only gratitude that this woman had existed, had loved Ethan and Lily, had left behind enough goodness that they knew how to recognize it when it appeared again. "I'll treasure this," she said quietly, "and I'll make sure Lily always knows her mother's story." Lily had been watching from the doorway, and now she came forward and took both their hands. "Can we be a real family now? Not just for the judge or because of the hearing, but really?" Ethan crouched down to her level. "We've been a real family for a while now, sweetheart. We just had to make it official." "So Clara's really my mama now?" The question hung in the air, delicate and dangerous. Clara's breath caught. Ethan looked at Clara, asking permission with his eyes, and she nodded. "If she's willing," Ethan said carefully, "Clara can be whatever you need her to be. Mother, friend, family. That's up to both of you to decide." Lily turned to Clara, her dark eyes serious. "I love my first mama. I still do. I'll always miss her." "I know," Clara said, "and you should. That love doesn't go away just because she's gone. But I have room for 2 mamas, one who I remember in my heart and one who's here with me now. Is that okay?" Clara pulled Lily into her arms, this child who'd brought her here, who'd chosen her before she'd even known she needed to be chosen. "That's more than okay. That's perfect. Lily clung to her, and Clara felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. Not burden, but purpose. She was a mother now, not by birth, but by choice. And that made it real. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan found Clara on the porch where they'd sat the night before the hearing. "I need to tell you something," he said, settling into the chair beside hers. "All right. When Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. I thought I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it, and the rest of my life would just be about surviving and raising Lily as best I could." He stared out at the darkness. "I stopped believing I deserved anything good, stopped letting myself want anything beyond the bare minimum." Clara waited, letting him find his words. "But then you came and you just started fixing things. Not me. I know I'm still a work in progress. But you fixed the house, fixed the meals, fixed the emptiness that had been eating us alive." He turned to look at her. "And somewhere in all of that, I started wanting again. Started hoping. And that terrified me because hope meant risk, and risk meant potential loss, and I didn't think I could survive losing someone else." "You don't have to be afraid of losing me," Clara said gently. "Don't I? People leave, people die, nothing's guaranteed." "No," she agreed. "Nothing's guaranteed. But that's not a reason to stop living. It's a reason to appreciate what you have while you have it." She reached for his hand. "I can't promise I'll live forever, Ethan. Nobody can. But I can promise that for as long as I'm here, I'm yours, completely. I'm not going anywhere by choice." He squeezed her hand, his grip almost desperate. "I don't know how to do this. How to be married to someone who isn't Sarah. How to love someone new without feeling like I'm betraying her memory." "Then don't love me like you loved her," Clara said. "Love me differently. Love me as the woman who came after, who knows your story and accepts it, who doesn't need you to forget the past, just to make room for a future." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "I think I'm already halfway there. I think I've been falling for you since that first week, when you made chicken and dumplings and Lily smiled for the first time in months. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it, because acknowledging it meant admitting I was moving on, and moving on felt like a betrayal." "It's not a betrayal," Clara said. "It's healing. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Betrayal would be forgetting Sarah or pretending she didn't matter. Healing is remembering her while still allowing yourself to be happy again, to build something new without erasing what came before." He pulled her hand to his chest, holding it over his heart. "Teach me how to do that, how to hold both things at once, the grief and the hope." "We'll figure it out together," Clara said. "One day at a time. Some days will be harder than others. Some days you'll miss her so much it hurts, and that's okay. I won't be threatened by that. I won't compete with her memory." "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Do you know that? The way you just accept all of this. The mess and the complications and the fact that I'm asking you to be patient with a broken man who's doing his best but still struggling." "You're not broken," Clara said firmly. "You're grieving. There's a difference. Broken things can't function. You're functioning just fine. You're running a ranch, raising a daughter, building a new life. You're just doing it while carrying a heavy weight, and that's hard, but it doesn't make you broken." Ethan looked at her like she'd just given him something precious, something he'd been desperately needing without knowing how to ask for it. "I love you," he said, and the words sounded surprised, like they'd escaped without his permission. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. I love you, Clara. Not the same way I love Sarah, but real and true and deeper than I expected to be capable of feeling again." Clara's breath caught. She'd been prepared to wait years for those words, had told herself she didn't need them, that respect and partnership would be enough. But hearing them now, seeing the vulnerable honesty in his eyes, she understood how much she'd been hoping for them anyway. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since that first night when you asked me to stay, when you admitted you needed help and let me in instead of pushing me away." He stood and pulled her to her feet, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her for the first time. Not the chaste peck at their hasty wedding, but a real kiss full of promise and possibility, and the beginning of something neither of them had thought they'd find again. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly. Even though we're already married, I want to bring you flowers and take you on picnics and learn everything about you. I want to build this marriage into something real and lasting, not just a legal arrangement that happened because we were desperate. It already is real, Clara said, but I'd like the courting anyway. He laughed, and the sound was so free and unguarded that it made her heart soar. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let's go inside, it's getting cold. They went in together, and for the first time, Ethan didn't leave Clara at her bedroom door. He hesitated in the hallway, looking uncertain. I don't expect, he started. I know, Clara said. We'll take our time with everything. There's no rush. But that night, for the first time, she didn't sleep alone in the small room above the kitchen. She slept in the main bedroom, in the bed Ethan had shared with Sarah, and if there were ghosts there, they were gentle ones, welcoming ones, as if Sarah herself was blessing this new beginning. Ethan held her carefully, like she might break, and Clara curled into his warmth and thought that this quiet intimacy, this simple comfort of not being alone, was worth every risk she'd taken in staying. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch flourished. The cattle were healthy, the garden produced abundantly, and Lily grew like a weed, shooting up so fast that Clara had to let down all her hems twice. The townspeople slowly accepted their marriage, though there were always a few who whispered about the hasty timing and questioned the propriety. Clara found she didn't care. Let them whisper. She had a family who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a future that looked brighter than anything she'd dared imagine. Mrs. Ashford left town in disgrace after her attempt to manipulate the court became common knowledge, and Mrs. Thornton avoided them entirely, which suited everyone just fine. Marshall Davies stopped by occasionally, ostensibly to check on things, but really just to share coffee and gossip. You did good, he told them one afternoon, standing up to those women, showing the judge what a real family looks like. We just told the truth, Clara said. That's rarer than you'd think, he replied. By autumn, the changes in Ethan were profound. He smiled readily, laughed often, and had started talking about the future in terms of plans instead of just survival. He built Clara a proper chicken coop with nesting boxes she could reach without bending, planted a rose garden outside the kitchen window because she'd mentioned loving roses once, and surprised her with a piano. An extravagant expense, but he'd remembered her saying she used to play as a child. I can't accept this, she'd protested when the wagon delivered it. Too late, it's already here. Ethan had grinned at her. Besides, Lily should learn, and I like the idea of music in the house again. So Clara learned to play again, rusty fingers remembering old songs, and Lily started lessons. And sometimes in the evenings, they'd all gather around the piano and sing, and those moments felt like the fullest kind of happiness. One night in late October, Clara realized she was late. Not late for dinner or late for chores, late in the way that made her heart race and her hands shake. She waited another week to be sure, then told Ethan. He stared at her, speechless, for a full minute. Then he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing like a man who'd just been given the world. A baby, he kept saying. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Clara asked, needing to hear it. Happy? He set her down gently, his hands on her face. Clara, I'm terrified and thrilled and so grateful I can barely breathe. A baby. Our baby. A child who'll grow up in a house full of love because you taught us how to be a family again. Lily was ecstatic when they told her. I'm going to be a big sister. A real big sister. She immediately started planning, deciding which room would be the nursery, what name would be best, how she'd teach the baby everything she knew. What if it's a boy? Ethan asked, amused. Then I'll teach him anyway, Lily said firmly. I'm going to be the best big sister in the whole territory. Clara had no doubt she would be. The pregnancy was easier than she'd feared, and Ethan was impossibly attentive, fussing over her until she had to threaten him with a wooden spoon to get him to stop hovering. You're treating me like I'm made of glass, she complained one morning when he tried to carry the water bucket for her. You're carrying my child. I'm allowed to fuss. I'm carrying our child, and I'm perfectly capable of lifting a bucket. They compromised. She'd do light work, he'd handle the heavy lifting, and they'd both stop being stubborn about it. Winter came again, a year after Clara had first walked up the ranch road with her carpet bag and her careful defenses. So much had changed since then. The house that had been empty and silent was now full of life and laughter. The man who'd been drowning in grief had learned to hope again. The child who'd been desperately lonely had a family that would never leave her. And Clara, who'd spent so many years being temporary, had finally found a place to belong. The baby was born in early spring, a healthy girl with dark hair and her father's eyes. They named her Sarah Grace. Sarah for the woman who'd come before, Grace for the second chance they'd all been given. Lily held her tiny sister with reverent care, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed beside Clara, his arm around her shoulders, and looked at his two daughters with such overwhelming love that Clara felt her own eyes fill. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for all of this, for staying, for loving us, for giving me a reason to believe in happiness again." "Thank you for letting me," Clara replied, "for seeing past the cook Lily hired and recognizing the woman who wanted so desperately to be part of a family." He kissed her temple. "Best decision I never made, letting Lily hire you without my knowledge." Clara laughed, tired and sore, but happier than she'd ever been. "Best advertisement I ever answered." That evening, after the midwife had gone and baby Sarah was sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Lily climbed onto the bed beside Clara. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered. "Of course. I always knew it would work, from the very first day when you walked up to our house with your bag and your serious face. I knew you were the one who would save us." Lily snuggled closer. "Mama Sarah sent you, I'm sure of it. She was watching from heaven and she saw how sad we were, and she sent you to make us a family again." Clara's throat closed. She wrapped her arm around Lily, holding her close. "Maybe she did. I know she did, because you're exactly what we needed. Not a replacement for her. You're your own person, but the right person, the perfect person for us." "You're pretty wise for a 7-year-old, Clara said. "I'm wise because I pay attention, and because I understand that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you have to fight for." Lily looked up at her. "You fought for us. Even when it was hard, even when those terrible women tried to make you leave, you stayed and you fought, and now we're a real family." "We were always a real family," Clara said, "from the moment I decided to stay." "From the moment I hired you," Lily corrected. "That's when it started. That's when everything changed." Clara couldn't argue with that. A 6-year-old child with egg money and determination had changed all their lives, had seen what none of them could see, that they belonged together, that they could heal each other, that family wasn't about blood or convention, but about choosing to love and be loved in return. Years later, when Sarah Grace was 5 and there was another baby on the way, when the ranch had expanded and prospered, when Clara's hair showed threads of silver and Ethan's face had lines from smiling instead of grief, Lily would tell the story at family gatherings. "I hired Mama Clara with egg money," she'd say proudly. "Papa didn't even know. I placed an advertisement in the newspaper, and when she showed up, he was so mad. But I knew. I knew she was the one who would make us whole again." And Clara would smile and add, "Best $2 you ever spent." "Best decision I ever made," Lily would correct. "And the bravest. Because it had taken courage. For all of them. Courage for a grieving man to open his heart again. Courage for a lonely woman to stop running and plant roots. Courage for a child to take matters into her own hands and fight for the family she deserved. But courage, Clara had learned, was what love required. Not the easy, romantic kind of love that existed in storybooks, but the real, complicated, hard-won love that built families and homes and futures worth fighting for. She'd come to the Hawkins Ranch expecting temporary work and a place to survive the winter. Instead, she'd found everything she'd stopped letting herself want: belonging, purpose, family, love. And it had all started with a child's desperate hope, an egg money advertisement, and a woman brave enough to answer it. On summer evenings, when the work was done and the children were playing in the yard, Clara would sit on the porch with Ethan and watch the sun set over the mountains. He'd hold her hand, his calloused fingers intertwined with hers, and they'd talk about nothing and everything. The day's work, plans for tomorrow, dreams for the future. Sometimes they'd talk about Sarah, sharing memories so Lily and little Sarah Grace would always know the woman who'd come before. And those conversations didn't hurt anymore. They were gentle, fond, a way of honoring the past while celebrating the present. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked one evening. Marrying a broken widower with a scheming daughter and a ranch in the middle of nowhere? Clara looked at the house that had become hers, at the garden she'd planted, at Lily teaching baby Sarah how to collect eggs from the hens. She looked at the man beside her who'd learned to love again despite his fear, who brought her wildflowers and built her chicken coops, and looked at her like she was the answer to prayers he'd been afraid to say. Not for a single second, she said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it was true. Every word of it. Because sometimes the best families aren't born. They're chosen. Sometimes healing begins with a simple meal and a warm kitchen. Sometimes love grows slowly, built on respect and partnership, and shared grief transformed into shared hope. And sometimes, just sometimes, a 6-year-old child with $2 and a desperate dream can change the course of 3 lives forever. The cook the cowboy never hired became the wife he couldn't imagine living without. And the lonely child who'd orchestrated it all grew up knowing she'd been the architect of her own happy ending. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Ethan would smile and say, "My daughter hired her without my permission." And Clara would add, "Best surprise I ever received." And Lily, no matter how old she got, would declare with absolute certainty, "I knew from the beginning. I knew she was the one who would make us whole." Because she had. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, through courage and love and sheer stubborn determination, Clara Monroe had taken a broken family and made it whole. And that, more than any fairy tale romance or dramatic rescue, was the greatest love story of all.